What's up, everyone? Welcome to this day in Philly sports history for November 8th, 2023. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. The big news of the day is we did it. The Mega John shirt design came out yesterday from phillygoat.com. Be sure to go check it out. I already ordered one. It's amazing. I ordered a hoodie. You can do hoodies, t-shirts, kids, as well as adult sizes. It is amazing. Exactly what I expected from Philly Goat. Go to phillygoat.com. Check out the Mega John shirt. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off of your order. It is a thing of beauty. It's the bye week anyway. Order it now. Have it hopefully in time for the next Monday night game. It is phenomenal. Go check it out, phillygoat.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off your order. The Mega John shirts are in. And while you're there, do a little other Christmas shopping too. Just be sure to use the promo code to get your 10% off. All right, now into the sports news. Union in action tonight in the playoffs. They are up in New England with a chance to advance with a victory. If they lose, they'll come back and play the deciding game 3 here in Chester. But let's just close it out tonight, Union. So hopefully we are celebrating moving on in the MLS playoffs tomorrow. We do have some Phillies news, and most of it centers around Aaron Nola. Howard Eskin is reporting that the Phillies likely aren't signing Nola. That he's probably looking in the range of 7 years, $30 million. And honestly, the money, it is what it is. One, it's not my money. And two, I think that is kind of the going rate for a starting pitcher. So it's something that they're going to have to do. They're going to have to spend in the $20 to $30 million range a year for any pitcher that they happen to sign anyway. My concern is the 7 years. That's a lot. He's 30, 31 now. That is a lot of years that I don't know. We've seen this happen with the Phillies in the past. And I'm not saying they're overvaluing Nola. It's just we saw it with Ryan Howard and getting hamstrung with that contract. I'm not saying Dombrowski is going down that same level. But if you can get somebody, and again, Nola is durable. We've talked a lot about his durability. He's inconsistent. I mean, when he's playoff Nola, he's ridiculous. But when he's regular season Nola, who knows what happens? I don't know if there's really much else out there better than Nola. I just don't know if 7 years is the way to go with that. So I'm anxious to see how this plays out. But we're starting now to get into some of the hot stove discussions. So I don't know. There's a lot of moves that this Phillies team needs to make. They did offer him a qualifying offer. I think it was like $20 million. I don't know the specifics about how that works, but I do know from what I've read, it's not really going to impact. They did not make an offer to Reese, and I don't necessarily think that comes as a shock because they need to figure out first with what Bryce Harper is going to do. Because if Bryce is going to stay at first, then there's really, unfortunately, there's no room for Reese on the team because you already have your DH with Schwarber, and I mean, even if Bryce goes to the outfield, it kind of causes a logjam out there. And do you maybe try to work? I don't know. Lots to dissect there, but the big news is Eskin is reporting. Now, with Howard Eskin, I don't want to badmouth him because I did meet him the other night. Nice guy, but sometimes he's gotten things like this wrong. However, the kind of the writing on the wall is that obviously Nola's going to want the long-term deal. And if somebody, put it this way, if somebody's going to offer me 2 extra years of $30 million than what the Phillies are willing to offer, probably going to take it. I mean, that's a shitload of money. But it's worth monitoring as we get more into the off season. Likely, I mean, obviously we're waiting on what Bryce is going to do, what he decides. But I think the first domino to fall is once we figure out the NOLA, then everything else sort of falls into place, because then depending on who they end up getting, if it is Blake Snell, maybe they go out then and extend Zach Wheeler. So lots of moving pieces, lots of moving parts. It's still very early in the process. But we're starting to get into some Phillies offseason news, and no rest for the weary. It just seems like 2 weeks ago or last week we were mourning the loss of that Game 7. So we will take it. Speaking of mourning a loss, tough one for the Flyers. They lost 2-1 out in San Jose, giving the San Jose Sharks their first win of the season, not allowing them to set the record for the worst start in NHL history. And I forget what year it was. It may have been 2017. Flyers did the same thing. I think it was Ottawa. So Flyers have a knack for losing to 0-10 teams to start the season for some reason. But they look to bounce back on track later this week. Sixers news. And let's start with the question of the day from yesterday. The question was, do you think the Sixers are a legitimate Eastern Conference contender? And for the most part, the overwhelming majority of you think they are. Some people think it's still a little too early to tell, but they're trending that way. And I heard somebody, and I don't know whether it was on the radio or I read it, and I really kind of liked it. It made perfect sense. They compared the trade of Harden to when Howie Roseman was able to trade Carson Wentz, and how the assets they got back, they were able to use to build around. The big difference, I think, with this situation is the Sixers could legitimately contend this year using those assets to make a move to bring somebody in either before the trade deadline or right at the trade deadline. So thank you again for everyone who reached out. I'm working on this. I have some things coming down the pipeline. As far as more interaction, it'll make it easier than ever. Stay tuned for that. I'm hopefully going to be getting that rolled out within the next couple weeks now that I've worked out some of the technical details of it. But the big news is the Sixers versus the Celtics tonight. Yes, it's very early in the season, but it's a good litmus test to see where we are with where we want to go and how what's going to happen. I mean, the Celtics sort of are the pinnacle of the Eastern Conference right now, them and the Bucks. So will they obviously the Celtics did not make it to the finals last year, but they retooled and are ready to go. So again, and it's our rival. There's a team that defeated us in the playoffs last year. It's a good rivalry anyway. So I'm excited to watch this. This is the most fun I've had this early in the season watching the Sixers since the early Brett Brown days and even the early Doc Rivers days. It's fun. They're a very fun team to watch, and I think there were times last year that they were just brutal to watch. And I talked yesterday about that game against they did what they should have done against the Wizards. And that's a game with under Doc Rivers, they would have either struggled with or found a way to lose. So the fact that they were able to blow out a team they should have blown out, that's a good thing. But looking forward to Sixers Celtics tonight. It's just going to be a fun game. And again, in the big grand picture, it's just a game in November. But it's sort of the crowd is going to be raucous, and I guarantee you that. Like, I know it's sold out. I saw that it was WWE night down there. My wife has tried to get us tickets, and it was sold out. But it's going to be a good crowd, must-see TV. Looking forward to the Sixers tonight. All right, some Eagles news. I mentioned Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz is back in the NFL, signing with the Rams to help back up Matthew Stafford, who's dealing with a thumb injury. It is what it is. I know everybody has like love-hate with Carson Wentz, but ultimately, it's kind of one of those things. Like I'm at this point, I'm indifferent to it. I've said it before, and I'll always say it. We don't win that Super Bowl without the way he played in the regular season. Ironically, he is going to the Rams, where basically his career trajectory changed. I always wondered what would have happened and how good he would have been had he not gotten that knee injury. But I think ultimately what you saw with him is what you get. And I mean, he was on fire. Everything was going well in that 2017, but I don't think he had the mental makeup to play and succeed in Philly. Just because of when there was a little bit of adversity, he kind of shrank, and when they drafted Jalen. So, but I wish him the best. No ill will, no hard feelings. Until if for some reason the Eagles play the Rams, and then of course, F that guy. All right. Today, we're going to go back to 1997, and on this day, back in 1997, the Phillies beat the Phillies. I'm all over the place. I got a cold, and like my head is just. Let's start over. We're going back to 1997, and on this day, the Flyers beat the Ottawa Senators 4-3. John Druce, John LeClair, Shjon Podein, and Chris Gratton all scored for the Flyers, who had a 4-1 lead and held on to win 4-3. Desjardins and Daniel LeClair each had an assist. Garth Snow saved 23 shots. Why am I mentioning this game? Just a random game. Well, one of the goal scorers was Chris Gratton. More on him in a minute. But the 97-98 Flyers, they were the defending Eastern Conference champions that year. Remember, they got swept out the year before in the Stanley Cup by Detroit. They ended up the 3 seed that year, got knocked out in 5 games by the Buffalo Sabres in the first round. But the big offseason pickup that year for the Flyers was Chris Gratton, who, more on him in a minute, was expected to come in and just really put them over the top. There was high expectations for him. But on this day, it was the Flyers beating the Senators 4-3 behind goals from John Druce, John LeClair, Shjon Podein, and Chris Gratton. All right, I've been telling you about Carcan. Mine are on their way. I checked. They should be being delivered this week. I'm anxious to just have my kids not be so sloppy. They just restocked, so it looks like you're good for Christmas, but don't wait. Do your Christmas shopping. Go to carcan.com. It's a trash can. It's storage. It triples as a cooler, I guess. They have all kinds of other car organizational things for you. Lots of great products. Be sure to check them out. Carcan.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery 20 off for 20% off your order. That's Jim Montgomery 20 off for 20% off your order. Right now they're going for $9.99. Buy more than one. Use that 20% off. If you buy in bulk, you can buy them for the people in your office. They give you free shipping after you order 5. You order bigger numbers, they give you a discount on that on top of the 20% off. Can't beat it. It's a great product. I'm so excited to get the back of my truck to be clean and not find Pop-Tart wrappers. Yesterday, my son was off of school because he was sick, so I took him with me to go vote. And I look, and there's just like cookie wrappers and fruit snack wrappers all stuffed in the door from soccer from both kids. So I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to have this now so they can just put it in, be done with it. That's carcan.com. Use the promo code Jim Montgomery 20 off, all one word, for 20% off of your order. Again, it makes a great holiday gift. Okay, so we've been talking about Philly's most disappointing athletes through the month of November. I mentioned this Flyers game because Chris Gratton scored a goal. Today's most disappointing Philadelphia athlete is one Chris Gratton. Now, not 100% his fault, kind of like we talked about Chris Webber yesterday. Part of it you have to blame the general manager for, but Chris Gratton also did not necessarily live up to the hype himself. Played a total of 108 games in a season and a half with the Flyers. The story of this, though, I think is why he's disappointing, because of all the hype that went with it. So pay attention, because there might be a quiz on this. So Chris Gratton signed. He was a restricted free agent in 1997. The Flyers extended him an offer sheet for 5 years, $16.5 million with a $9 million signing bonus that was due 1 week after signing the contract. This is key because Bobby Clark was playing games with the Tampa Bay general manager, because they didn't have they were having cash flow problems, and basically he knew they wouldn't be able to come up with the $9 million, or likely wouldn't be able to come up with the $9 million to pay the signing bonus. Bobby Clark also was in love with Chris Gratton, loved him from when he was in the draft, and if you know anything about Bobby Clark, he sort of had that mindset when he was going after a guy, he was going to get it. I mean, look what with Lindros and all those other things that kind of played out. The problem with Chris Gratton was the Flyers didn't necessarily need a center. At the time, they had Lindros and Brind'Amour were their top two centers, and they had some young pieces and not necessarily excuse me, somebody who you would have thought would have been on the Flyers' radar based on kind of what was going on. Now, Gratton was sort of coming into his own, like had a great season the year before, but Bobby Clark wanted him. Bobby Clark was going to get him, and the key is that $9 million signing bonus because, like I said, Tampa Bay was having cash flow problems, and he really didn't think they could match it. Well, this obviously pissed off the Tampa Bay general manager. And so back then, what it was, they faxed the offer sheet. And for you young kids out there, fax is basically like you put the contract in a machine and it gets sent over the phone lines, and it's basically like a precursor to email. Look it up. Ask your parents, ask your grandparents about fax machines. But ultimately, he said that the fax wasn't legible and said, I don't have to honor this. This is against the NHL rules. So he said, screw it, traded Chris Gratton, the rights to Chris Gratton, to Chicago. And he said, well, the whole situation was shady. He basically said, well, I did this before the fax came in. And the NHL was like, no, if you couldn't read the fax, you should have just said, can you send over another one legally or more legibly? So the NHL ultimately ruled in favor of the Flyers in this case, and Tampa Bay said, "Fine, we're gonna match the offer." Nobody believed it because they didn't have the cash. So Ed Snyder stepped in, went to the owner of the Lightning and said, "Listen, let's make a trade." He went to Bobby Clark and said, "Look, let's offer them something just so they don't match the offer." So they offered them 4 straight years of first-round draft picks. This is where it doesn't make any sense, but it was 98, 99, 2000, 2001 first-round draft pick just so they would not match the offer. Well, then Tampa Bay traded those picks back to the Flyers in exchange for Mikael Renberg and Carl Dykhouse. This is where Ed Snyder went to the owner of Tampa Bay and said, let's work out a deal with some of these players, because they wanted to include Rod Brind'Amour in the trade, but Ed Snyder and Bobby Clark were like, no, we don't want to give up Rod Brind'Amour. So it ended up being Renberg and Dykhouse back for those 4 picks. So ultimately, the Flyers gave Carl Dykhouse and Mikael Renberg to Tampa Bay for Chris Gratton. The other stuff, I don't know, and I could not find a reason why. Nobody understands why there were draft picks involved that went and then came back. Issue was, remember I said they didn't need him. Well, the players also didn't necessarily like the deal because of how much money he got up front, and because Mikael Renberg was a younger player and people loved him. Like, he was on that Legion of Doom line with LeClair and Lindros. So Gratton came in and never really fit into the locker room. Was supposed to be the savior at a position where the Flyers didn't need it. Brind'Amour was pissed off because he got moved to wing. He didn't want to play wing. He had that solid season in 97-98, probably his best season with the Flyers. But then go fast forward to the 98-99 season. He had 1 goal and 7 assists in 26 games. The savior? Well, guess what? The savior was traded back to Tampa Bay then. So when it was all said and done, Chris Gratton had a year and a half, 108 games as a Flyer. The Flyers lost Rod Brind'Amour, or Mikael Renberg, pissed off Rod Brind'Amour. had the locker room not happy with Bobby Clark. And then you kind of know what happened then. That's where the fighting with Bobby Clark and Eric Lindros. So it kind of all stems back. And that's why Chris Gratton is today's most disappointing athlete. And of all the moves that Bobby Clark made, and there was a lot of them that were head scratchers, this may have been his worst. And again, this is about Chris Gratton being disappointing, but it always goes back to the general manager, because this made no sense from a roster standpoint. Pissed off your locker room, and you ended up trading him back to the team less than a year and a half later. Makes no sense as a head scratcher, but today's Philly's most disappointing athlete is Chris Gratton. Let me know what you think. Should he be there as one of the most disappointing? I think it was because of all the hype. On this day, though, Flyers did beat the Senators. Chris Gratton being one of the 4 guys that scored a goal for the Flyers that day. Garth Snow saved 23 shots. Philly's extending an offer to Aaron Nola, and that is today's question of the day. What would you offer Aaron Nola? Do you want him back? And if you want him back, what should the Phillies offer? And I think money-wise, it is what it is. Like, that's what the going rate for a pitcher is. But let me know, how many years are you willing to offer Aaron Nola in a contract? That's today's question of the day. Be sure to get that answer over to me however you can. Text message, leave a comment wherever you're watching or liking, or check my social media. How much would you offer Aaron Nola in a contract? Big Sixers game tonight. Looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Good luck to the Union as they hope to advance in the MLS playoff. Be sure to go to Philly Goat and get that Mega John t-shirt or hoodie if you want. It's amazing. It's a thing of beauty. And use that promo code Jim Montgomery for 10% off. Happy Hump Day, everyone. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History. I'm Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a Wednesday. And until